Getting lost seems a lot harder than it used to be. In the famous found footage horror movie, The Blair Witch Project, Heather famously states, "It is very hard to get lost in America these days, and it's even harder to stay lost." Heather's statement turned out to be horrifyingly wrong, as she and her two friends were never found after the 1994 footage of their Blair Witch Project was recovered. This supposedly true film turned out to be fiction, but the fear of getting lost turns out to be very real, even in an age where almost everyone has access to GPS navigation. Being lost is a sensation that for most of us only occurs in a few short moments, with it usually being resolved by either modern technology or common sense. Actually getting lost can be much more haunting, as you can lose your sense of reality when no way or direction seems to lead anywhere. Today we will explore the horror, dread, and panic that surrounds Mazeophobia, which is simply put, the fear of getting lost. While being lost is often synonymous with losing track of your path in a forest, there are many cases of it occurring on the sea, in caves, and in fictional situations such as space, as this is yet to happen in a real-life scenario. Nature is amazing, and it's thus why hiking is such a fun and relaxing activity for many people. National parks are often great hiking spots, as they provide a lot of freedom for hikers, with many paths and ways to walk. Hiking safety seems to have increased, but people still get lost more often than you might think. I have watched many episodes of the show I Shouldn't Be Alive, a documentary series from the Discovery Channel that showcases how people survived life-threatening scenarios. Arrogance seems to be the main cause for most being lost cases that are featured on this show, along with overconfidence and misjudgment. In the first episode of the first season, called Escape from the Amazon, we see how two friends become lost in the Amazon after a bunch of bad decisions. After being promised to find an unknown native tribe in a rainforest, they go on a long hike with an experienced jungle guide. When one of the men gets a serious food infection, they have no choice but to go back. The two other friends decide to stay, and the man and the guide leave to go back to the village. We then witness this harrowing adventure the two friends find themselves in, showcasing the many obstacles and hurdles the Amazon can provide. This episode showcases that the rainforest is not only a physical threat, but also an extreme mental threat, especially when the two friends get separated from each other due to a violent river. One of the lost men finds himself walking in circles, and he ends up retracing his footsteps, thinking they were his friends. In the end, they both survive, both alive to tell the story. Escape from the Amazon, but mostly I Shouldn't Be Alive, drives home how ignorant humans can be, especially when it comes to these deceptive but extreme biomes that can be found all around the globe. The Amazon rainforest is millions and millions of square miles, making it the ultimate maze of bush, leaves, vines, and moist. It seems so incredibly easy to overlook the density and danger of a place like this, especially when you are with a group of people. Fortunately, everyone featured on I Shouldn't Be Alive is alive because they live to tell the story. It is thus why I feel like this show gives its viewers false hope, as there are many stories of people being lost that do not have a happy ending. The story of Everett Roos is a perfect example of this. Everett was born in 1914 in Oakland, California, and later became an artist and poet who liked to wander and travel. Everett traveled with horses through the high deserts of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado, and made this extensive travel through the wilderness his goal. When he left Escalante, Utah, in November 1934, he headed towards one of the roughest areas in the country. He had sent a letter to his parents saying that he would be gone for a while, as he planned to not return to civilization for at least 2 months. This letter was also the last thing anyone ever heard from Everett, as his parents alarmed the locals after not hearing anything from him for 3 months. Searchers stumbled upon evidence of his campsite, alongside the word Nemo, meaning nobody in Greek, carved in a rock. Everett's body or remains were unfortunately never found, which probably leaves him missing for eternity. It is unclear what happened to Everett, but some of his poetry seem to portray the acceptance of his fate. 。 In a poem titled Wilderness Song, Everett wrote this: "Say that I starved, that I was lost and weary, that I was burned and blinded by the desert sun, footsore, thirsty, sick with strange diseases, lonely and wet and cold, but that I kept my dream." It seems more likely that Everett had put his dream before his own safety. Let's go back to a fictional story of people getting lost, the Blair Witch Project. I am a firm believer that this is one, if not the best, horror movie portrayals of getting lost in a dense forest. The film depicts a young filmmaker, Heather, who wants to make a documentary about the Blair Witch in the Black Hills Forest located in Maryland, alongside her friends Josh and Mike. When they lose the map and with it their sanity, they become lost. This is not the type of loss that one may experience when they go off trail, but the type of being lost that is so extreme that you have no other choice but to spend days and nights in the forest without any sense of direction and with little food to survive. This is combined with the fact that they might be haunted by the Blair Witch. The internet is also home to many theories that suggest that there was never a witch and that Josh and Mike planned to kill Heather. I am a big fan of this theory, but I just don't think it's what the filmmakers intended for the audience to believe. I've always found the idea of the Blair Witch quite haunting, as I often assumed that the witch bewitches the forest in the film, making it practically inescapable for our free fans. I like to see the inescapable part as supernatural, but it's not unlikely that it is simply the consequence of the paranoia and disorientation the three friends find themselves in. The witch aspect of the film is scary, but the real scariness lies in the panic and terror that ensues when Heather loses track of their path. From the moment Heather realizes she has lost her map, everything goes downhill, making for a second and third act that is filled with anger and confusion, which eventually leads to their vanishing. The Blair Witch Project makes you glad that you're not as stupid as these three people, and thus serves as two warnings, for people that like to venture away from the tracks, and for people that seek evil in forests. You can decide for yourself which one is more moronic. Likely influenced by the Blair Witch Project, the 2012 indie horror game Slender, the 8 Pages, also plays on the fear of being lost in the forest while being chased by an unknown entity. Most games that depict the protagonist being lost can be placed into one of three types, with Slender belonging to survival/wonder type games. The game of Slender is relatively short and is set in a dense forest during the middle of the night. The player is tasked to find the 8 pages that are sprawled throughout the forest without getting caught by Slenderman. This game provides the player with a very limited flashlight, which has to be used in order to navigate through this claustrophobic and maze-like forest. Slender is scary, and the game and its mechanics are quite minimal, which enhanced the fear I once had for this game. I was always able to imagine myself wandering inside this forest, being chased by this demonesque creature. The visuals of this game hold up surprisingly well, especially considering how small of a project this initially was. The trees feel almost a bit too lively, and the surrounding sound, while simple, is effective and creepy. I have a lot of respect for this little game, as it undoubtedly started an internet horror game craze that lasted well throughout the 2010s. Unlike Slender, the 2017 indie horror game called Marginalia has a way more ambiguous antagonist, while the game itself is slightly similar compared to Slender's gameplay. Marginalia can be classified as a walking simulator, as walking is its sole game mechanic and storytelling device. The game leaves the player without any instructions, so the only thing you can do is trust your own instincts. As you find out later, whenever you walk underneath a lantern in the forest, you get a monologue that adds to the story. Marginalia follows a person who has found himself in the forest of Castlebrook, looking for a man named Eric. The forest we walk through is shrouded in darkness and mist, making it disorienting and hard to navigate. However, the light from the lantern seems to guide us, almost as if there's some kind of spiritual force that is attracting us towards it. This force the player experiences becomes clear later in the game, but the atmosphere in Marginalia is always unsettling, no matter where you are on the map. According to Jacob Geller, Marginalia is extremely fast, making it so that you can walk in a random direction for a long time before you will hit a dead end. One thing I appreciate about this game is that it's not concerned about the player getting lost, because getting lost seems to be its narrative. There is enough guidance within the game to somewhat send the player in the right direction, but playing it definitely makes you feel lost. The more disoriented and weirded out you get by this game, the further you seem to progress. While you can complete this game in under 1 hour, when you reach the end you feel like you have walked an impressive distance through this forest. Marginalia gives me that feeling you have when you walk through a forest, alone, while the sun is setting or when it has set, but enough light remains to see everything around you. This is when you know you are alone, but it still feels like there is some other presence with you. Things become unsettling rather quickly when you focus too much on this weird feeling. Games that feature the playing being lost, whether accidentally or intentionally, can be put into 3 separate categories. As mentioned, the first category is survival/wonder type games. Being lost is part of the story, and it's important for the gameplay. This includes Slender and Marginalia, but also more survival type games such as Subnautica or Raft. You might be familiar with the second category if you are a fan of the Backrooms. I like to call this one the Lost in Liminality type of game. This is a more abstract form of being lost, as the scenarios are often inspired by dreams, nightmares and hallucinations, and are usually not based in reality. Backroom type games fall into this category, but also games such as the Stanley Parable and the fairly new Amaze-ing. We will dive deeper into this more abstract fear of being lost later. The third category is what I like to call lost on the map in open world type games. A famous example of this would be Minecraft. If you've ever played a Minecraft survival world, you know how disorienting it can be to find your way back to your home. This obviously has to do with the fact that the map of Minecraft is unfathomably large, and the landscapes can look pretty similar. There are many ways you can cheat yourself out of being lost in Minecraft, but I've always had moments where I had absolutely no idea where to go. The unfamiliarity of the world around you can be a little disturbing, as it makes you unsure whether you will find your way back or end up straying away further. This feeling is ultimately what makes games like Minecraft so great, as there's a close to an infinite amount of area to explore. I would never forgive myself if I didn't mention an older but slightly different example of this category that one can find in Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 is obviously a million times more linear than Minecraft, but never fails to confuse its players on certain levels. Speaking from personal experience, it is especially Hazy Maze Cave that had me lost for several hours. Hazy Maze Cave is the biggest stage in the game and has many different segments and concepts spread throughout the level. It always seemed like I discovered a new area whenever I started playing this stage again. Hazy Maze Cave's aura is comparable to that of Dry World, combined with the confusement that is caused by the amorphous level design. I've always had a love-hate relationship with the drawing of the map that is featured in this stage, as it's both simplistic but also extremely confusing and inaccurate. It never felt like you were actually following a direction, you were just exploring and hoping that what you were doing was right. This is a type of discomfort that seems rather rare these days, but I can always greatly appreciate it when it's recreated in modern media. A well-known post on r/nosleep has to be the Search and Rescue Officer series, a post that delves into the bizarre encounters that this man has to tell. The stories on r/nosleep are usually fiction that is written to sound true, so take stories from here with a grain of salt. The most interesting encounter from this Search and Rescue Officer is without a doubt the stairs in the woods. The man tells us about he sometimes comes across these random sets of stairs without any structure attached to them. These stairs are randomly found deep within forests and seem to hold some kind of supernatural power. following is an unsettling story from the experience of one of his colleagues about the stairs. My buddy has been an SAR officer for about 7 years. He started when he was a junior in college, and he had a very similar experience when he first encountered the stairs. His trainer told him almost the exact same thing mine did, which was never to go near, touch, or ascend them. For the first year, he did just that, but apparently his curiosity got the better of him, and on one call he broke away from the line and went to go check a set of them out. He said that they were about 10 miles from the path where a teenage girl had vanished, and the dogs were following a scent. He was on his own, lagging behind the main group, when he saw a set of stairs off to his left. They looked like they were from a new house because the carpeting was pristine and white. He said that as he got closer, he didn't feel any different or hear any weird noises. He was expecting something to happen, like bleeding from his ears or collapsing, but he got right up next to them and didn't feel anything. The only thing, he said, that was odd was that there was absolutely no debris on the steps. No dirt, leaves, dust, or anything. And there didn't appear to be any signs of animal or insect activity in the immediate area, which he found strange. It was less like things were avoiding them, and more like they just happened to be in a relatively barren part of the forest. He touched the stairs and didn't feel anything except that sort of sticky feeling you get from a new carpet. Making sure his radio was on, he slowly climbed the stairs. He said it was terrifying because the weight had been stigmatized. He wasn't really sure what was going to happen to him. He joked that half of him expected to be teleported to some other dimension, and the other half was watching for a UFO to come swooping down. But he got to the top with little effect, and he stood there looking around. But, he said, the longer he stood on the top step, the more he felt like he was doing something very, very wrong. He described it as the feeling you'd get if you were in a part of a government building you have no business being in. As if someone was going to come and arrest you or shoot you in the back of the head at any second. He tried to brush it off, but the feeling got stronger and stronger, and that's when he realized that he couldn't hear anything anymore. The sounds of the forest were gone, and he couldn't hear his own breathing. It was like some kind of weird, awful tinnitus, but more oppressive. He climbed back down and rejoined the search, and didn't mention what he'd done. But, he said, the weirdest part came after. His trainer was waiting back at the welcome center after the search ended for the day, and he courted my buddy before he could leave. He said his trainer had this look of intense anger, and he asked what was wrong. "You went up them, didn't you?" My buddy said it wasn't phrased as a question. He asked how his trainer knew. The trainer just shook his head. Because we didn't find her. The dogs lost her scent. My buddy asked what that had to do with anything. The trainer asked how long he'd been up the stairs, and my buddy said no more than a minute. The trainer gave him this really awful, almost dead-eyed look, and told him that if he ever went up another set of stairs again, he'd be fired. Immediately. The trainer walked away, and I guess he's never answered any of the questions my buddy has asked him about it since. The SAR officer who made the r/no sleep post has no idea what these stairs are and what they represent, but his best guess is that they're some otherworldly or interdimensional structure. A common theory on structures and apparitions is that we can only perceive everything we see because it exists in our dimension. Sometimes we can catch glimpses of a higher dimension, which would explain out of the ordinary stuff like random stairs in forests. Abandoned stair structures are the type of things you don't want to come across when you get lost. It almost seems that perhaps abandoned buildings, ghosts, and in this case, otherworldly formations are things people get scared of when they think of getting lost deep in nature. It is interesting to note that this type of supernatural seems to have its own place inside the forest, as the forest itself has always been a home to ancient spiritual practice. It is thus why nature has always been described as sublime, a type of beauty that puts people in a different headspace. I can talk about forests and similar natural occurrences for hours, but I would like to explore a structure that is designed to be lost in: mazes. The mazes I have always known were made to be fun. It was a sort of confusing attraction that had this mystery with it, and one that can come in many different variants and sizes. Drawn mazes, for instance, play on the art of being lost. I can appreciate the beauty of a drawn maze, but I will never feel lost in them. I love that there are literally millions of different ways to portray and draw a maze or a labyrinth, all with unique rules and boundaries. There's this website called doyoumaze.com that portrays different types of mazes, all with their own unique properties and rules. The simplest form of a maze is a standard maze, but the variations get wilder the further you go down on this site. Different types are arrow mazes that have the solver only go in the direction the arrow is pointing to, find the item mazes, warp zone mazes, pattern mazes, and even math mazes that require the solver to solve a mathematical problem in order to choose the correct direction. As you can tell, the possibilities are potentially endless. The perspective one has of a maze can obviously change when real mazes or labyrinths are encountered. I myself have never felt lost in a maze, nor have I ever walked through one that seemed really challenging. However, underground structures such as ancient pyramids will have elaborate mazes that actively try to stop grave robbers from finding potential treasure. Egyptian pyramids are known to have false passageways, sliding doors, hidden exits, and even secret chambers that all function to confuse and misdirect adventurers that were seeking treasure. We will never know how dreadful it must have been to be trapped inside a pyramid or an underground maze-like structure, but I believe Junji Ito comes pretty close to portraying this fear in one of his more terrifying stories. In The Unbearable Maze, we follow two friends, Noriko and Sayoko, who are on a hike deep in the mountains. When they take a wrong turn and get lost, they stumble upon a giant Buddha statue that is placed in the middle of nowhere. They are rather surprised when they see monks in training nearby, but continue to explore this strange place. When one of the monks confronts them, he tells the two girls that they can stay at the temple for the night. The girls learn that the monks in this temple practice esoteric Buddhism, with some unique techniques mixed in. When the girls arrive at their room for the night, they are asked if they want to join in with the meditation practice, and they decide to do so. We see that while meditating, Sayoko suffers from this horrible form of anxiety where she is extremely self-conscious, but her episode is quickly interrupted when their roommate for the night, Aya Kuramoto, introduces herself. She proceeds to tell the girls that she joined the sect in order to look for her brother who has been missing for 5 years. Sayoko proceeds to walk off to catch some air and talks to one of the monks, who asks her if she wants to join the sect. He explains that the monks will enter eternal meditation tonight, a ritual that is only performed once every 3 years. Sayoko is confused by this so-called eternal meditation and proceeds to ask Aya about it. Aya explains that these monks practice achieving nirvana, which is a state of eternal peace and meditation. In order to achieve this state, the monks practice self-mummification, a long and painful process of fasting which is achieved by only eating pine needles, resins, and seeds found in the mountains, which explains why the monks' their faces and bodies look so skeletal. After witnessing part of the final ritual, Aya decides to leave as she believes the ritual has something to do with her brother's disappearance. The girls decide to follow her. They try to look for the group of monks, but they all seem to have disappeared, as they have left their torches behind the Buddha statue. They then find this hidden door near the statue that opens and shows this old and dark staircase. This staircase leads to a narrow corridor that goes on for a long time, which eventually leads to 2 long rows of Buddhist mummies, standing in their eternal vigil. The girls continue to follow Aya, as she is now sure that her brother is down here. The structure seems to be designed like a maze, and the further they go, the newer the mummies become. After searching the labyrinth, Aya stumbles upon her brother, mummified, just like the others. Aya wants to stay to be with her brother, so Noriko and Sayoko decide to leave this maze. After a while, they get completely lost. Noriko falls to the ground, telling Sayoko that she cannot deal with people staring. Sayoko tells her that the mummies can't stare, but it's when they look up that they realize that they stumbled upon the most terrible part of the maze. And just when you think an underground maze is horrifying enough, this story adds live mummies to it. If you weren't aware, self-mummification is a real documented Buddhist practice, but it's not as common as this story makes it out to be. The real practice of self-mummification only has a minimum of 17 monks who successfully mummified themselves between 1081 and 1903. This story is, however, very well made and shows its horror through creepy drawings and simple dialogue, as with all Junji Ito stories. I think The Unbearable Maze simply shows how the human interest in caves, ancient buildings, and underground maze-like structures triumphs above the fear and dangers these places may inhabit. Adding some creepy element to a setting such as this is quite effective, but it has been really popular lately to add more fictional and dreamlike properties to media that loosely portray the feeling of getting lost. As already mentioned, games like Amaze-ing and the Stanley Parable have the player mostly lost in their mind, as the places the players find themselves in appear to be very abstract. Liminality is like getting lost with an extra step, as we not only fail to recognize our surroundings, but also realize that the surroundings we do see are only loosely based on our world, as they feel like an empty dream, or perhaps a blueprint made from a person who has been told of structures and places on Earth, tried to recreate them, but never actually saw any of the structures and concepts themselves. An interesting but important concept that games like Amaze-ing and the Stanley Parable use is non-euclidean geometry. Simply put, non-euclidean geometry is a type of geometry that does not follow the traditional Euclidean rules, such as that a triangle always adds up to 180 degrees. This video, called Non-Euclidean Worlds Engine, shows what programmers can do with an engine like this. We can create what seems to be a short tunnel, but when entered, you find yourself in a tunnel that was way longer than it was portrayed from its exterior. A clever example is this seemingly 4-room house, but when walking through, you notice that there are actually only 3 rooms. Interestingly enough, this is not something our brain immediately picks up, as it doesn't feel odd when the camera only goes through 3 rooms. In Amaze-ing, the player is tasked with walking through a lazy river in what appears to be an abandoned pool house. This maze is completely non-Euclidean and confusing. If you don't take the right turns in a particular order, you will walk in a loop. This looping can be a little frustrating, but it also feels a little off. What is interesting to note is that whenever media portray people getting lost, the same haunting thing seems to happen. Ending up in a place that you've already seen or explored, meaning you are walking in circles. It seems that the more you get lost, the seemingly more non-Euclidean the place you are lost in gets. It obviously does not actually get non-Euclidean, but it kind of feels like it. Amaze-ing experiments with misdirection a lot. Whenever you have a space that is made to be lost in and add confusing elements such as time dilation or non-Euclidean properties to it, it becomes exponentially harder to escape said space. The internet and all the media surrounding it are great building blocks for concepts like this. It seems like abstract horror is experiencing a sort of renaissance, and I am excited to see what more this will bring. The beauty of this country is becoming part of me. I feel more detached from life and somehow gentler. I've always been unsatisfied with life as most people live it. Always I want to live more intensely and richly. This passage was written by Everett Roos in the 1930s, the explorer who was never found after his expedition. Everett's ideas of detachment resonate with me, as he was truly unsatisfied with life as most people live it. Humans clearly need nature, as it contains and is everything we ever came from. Being or getting lost seems to be part of the journey, part of what makes hiking and exploring nature so fun. You never truly know what you will come across, as nature is unpredictable. Everett Roos had all of this figured out. Life, according to him, is about exploration, about doing the things you want to do before it's all too late. Thank you for watching.